My name is Blair Quinn. I'm 38, founder and CEO of Quinn & Co. Logistics, a company I built from scratch delivering late-night orders myself when drivers quit. I thought I knew what exclusion felt like in business, but nothing prepared me for being banned from my own family's yacht trip. No conversation, no warning, just quietly erased my name, removed like I never existed. The worst part wasn't being excluded. It was how long I kept telling myself it was accidental. How many times I sat at their tables thinking I belonged only, to find out I never even had a seat. This time it wasn't business. It was personal. I always start my morning slow, a cup of black coffee in my favorite ceramic mug, the one with a small crack near the handle I never bothered to replace. The kitchen window lets in just enough sun to catch the steam rising from the sink. Today the air tastes different. There's a bitterness in it that clings to the tongue like burned sugar. Graham had already left for his early meeting, leaving behind half a banana browning on the counter, and the fading scent of his aftershave, musky and heavy, clinging to the marble like a memory that refuses to fade. I scrolled through my phone out of habit, thumb flicking past emails about logistics routes and warehouse audits until I saw it. A boomerang. Veronica had posted it, her diamond-studded wrist raising a flute of champagne, clinking glasses in a looping echo. The caption read, "Family getaway tradition loading. Can't wait to set sail." My thumb froze mid-scroll. The yacht trip, the one they'd called Family Legacy, whispered with so much reverence that it felt like church. My coffee cooled next to me as I clicked into the video, watching the loop again and again. Her smile was tight controlled, the smile of a woman who knew she had won before the game began. I checked the family group chat, Preston Legacy Voyagers. Graham had added me years ago, then quietly removed me after I questioned why Valora no Veronica sat at the head table while I was seated near the back exit. Long story. Not worth telling. Not anymore. No messages. No email. No text inviting me aboard the boat I bought. The pulse under my skin wasn't racing. No, it was worse. It was still. A sinking stillness. The kind you feel when you watch a wave pull back from shore and know it's about to return, monstrous. That afternoon, as I rinsed a glass, my phone buzzed. A message from Veronica. Not meant for me. A screenshot of cabin assignments. My name crossed out in thick black. Next to it, confirmed Belle, her yoga instructor. The same Belle who once asked if I was Graham's assistant, not his wife. Then a voice note. Veronica's voice mid-laugh dripping with honeyed malice. Well, at least the energy on board won't be so tight this year. Tight? That's what they called me behind closed doors. Too tight, too cold, too quiet, too much. I placed the phone down without replying. My hands were steady, but my jaw ached from clenching. That night at dinner, Graham scrolled stock alerts while eating his salmon. I asked lightly, "Did you know your family's planning another yacht trip?" He glanced up, blinking mouthful. "Yeah. Mom mentioned it last week. They're still finalizing the list." I tilted my head. "Am I on the list?" He frowned, putting down his fork. "Of course. Why wouldn't you be?" I smiled small, careful not to let the crack in my chest spill out onto the table between us. Just curious. He returned to his phone. "I'll double check." But he wouldn't. He never did. After dinner, I washed the dishes one by one, feeling the heat of the water scald my knuckles until they burned pink. Silence says more than shouting. It seeps into bone and teaches it how to hold grief without trembling. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, slicing air into neat sections. I thought of every time they left me out birthdays. I learned about from Instagram stories, brunches. I found out about too late dinners, where conversation stopped when I entered the room. The worst part wasn't that Veronica excluded me. It was that she never needed to say it out loud. Her silence was so elegantly brutal. At some point, you stop asking why they don't include you. You start asking why you keep trying to belong. Before turning off the lamp, I pulled my journal from the drawer and wrote one sentence in black steady ink. Watch. Don't react yet. The next morning, a text from Veronica. Her words glittered with passive sweetness. Hey Blair, just realized we might have missed reserving you a spot on the yacht. Totally my oversight. Trip filled up faster than expected this year. So sorry, hope we can catch up after. I didn't reply. I couldn't trust my fingers not to betray the icy composure I clung to like a blade. Mid-morning, an email popped up from the charter company. Cancellation confirmation. Cabin released request logged 3 days ago. Requested by Veronica Preston. So that's how she wanted to play it. I printed the email smooth, crisp paper that cut the air with its truth. I slid it into a manila folder labeled Tax and Property. Soon it would have a new label. That evening, Graham came home as if it was any other Thursday. Shoes off, beer from the fridge, scrolling his phone. A man unaware his entire life was about to split down its quiet fault lines. Veronica texted me today, I said. He took a sip. Oh yeah, about the yacht trip. She says she forgot to reserve me a spot. He frowned, caught off guard but not surprised. Really, that seems odd. She called it a miscommunication. He swirled his bottle like it might reveal a smarter response. Maybe she thought plans changed. I mean, let's not assume the worst. She replaced my name with someone else, Graham. That's not an assumption. It's a receipt. He stayed quiet. In that silence, I heard everything I needed to. Later that night, while he watched sports news on TV in the den, I sat at the dining table and opened my laptop. I didn't scroll old photos searching for proof I once belonged. Instead, I opened a new note and titled it, Things She's Done That I Let Slide. The list flowed faster than I expected. Forgot to include me in Rachel's bridal shower chain. Sent Christmas itineraries without my name twice. Tagged the wrong Blair on Facebook and left it up for days. Scheduled brunch the day after telling me they were taking a break from gatherings. By the end, my jaw ached again. Not from anger, but from clarity. Before closing my laptop, another message arrived. From her assistant attached with a screenshot. Veronica, don't worry. She's not coming. I handled it. She handled it. I stared at those words until the room blurred. Then I added that screenshot to the folder. No tears. No shaking hands. Just steel threading its way up my spine. This wasn't about a yacht cabin. It never was. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Outside, the sky was slate gray, heavy with secrets waiting to be revealed. The first threads of light seeped over the horizon, painting the world in muted silver, as if reality itself was holding its breath. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee gone cold between my palms, staring down at the folder in front of me. The papers inside weren't just receipts. They were confessions. Proof of a life built quietly in the shadows, while others posed in borrowed light. By mid-morning, I booked a car to Newport. I didn't pack a swimsuit or sunscreen. This wasn't a vacation. This was a reclamation. Into my leather tote went ownership documents, bank wire transfers, email confirmations, notarized agreements. Every piece of proof that I wasn't just an accessory to this legacy. I was the architect of it. When I arrived at the marina, the air tasted of salt and money. Yachts lined the docks like pristine white teeth under the rising sun, their flags snapping in the breeze with impatient confidence. My heels clicked against the weathered planks, each step punctuated with the knowledge that I no longer needed anyone's permission to exist. Then, I saw her. Veronica stood near the boarding gate, her hair pinned perfectly into a French twist diamond earrings, catching the morning light in sharp, deliberate flashes. Her lips were curved into that curated smile she reserved for donors, photographers, and victims alike. She was laughing at something Tom said until she saw me. For a breathless second, her face froze. It was subtle, a hairline fracture in porcelain composure, but I saw it, like glass cracking under sudden ice. I didn't slow down. As I passed, she tilted her head slightly, voice dripping with honeyed poison. "Blair, we didn't know you were coming." I met her gaze steady and unblinking. "No, you didn't." She opened her mouth to speak, to spin her web around me as she always did, but I kept walking. The staff at the boarding ramp straightened when they saw me approach. A tall woman in navy stepped forward, her hair pulled into a precise bun, eyes sharp and respectful. She dipped her head slightly. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Blair." Then louder her voice, slicing through the stunned morning air. "The owner is now aboard." Silence fell around us like a dropped veil. Veronica's hand trembled around her champagne flute, her knuckles bleaching white against its stem. Graham stood behind her, silent, his eyes flicking back and forth between her and me, confusion flickering across his face like a failing light bulb. I walked onto the yacht without looking back. My heels tapped once, twice, before sinking into the teak deck with a quiet finality. Each step a silent reminder. I am not a guest. I am the gatekeeper. Inside the salon reeked of Veronica white orchids, arranged with military precision linen, table runners, ironed flat gold-rimmed glasses, aligned in perfect, soulless symmetry. Her signature aesthetic curated warmth, hiding calculated ice. She followed me moments later, her perfume arriving before her voice, which was low and tight enough to cut bone. "You planned this," she hissed, her breath trembling with rage. "You think showing up changes anything?" I set my folder down on the marble bar with deliberate calm. I flipped it open, pulling out the ownership contract, each movement precise and unhurried. I didn't need to raise my voice. Power was not in volume. It was in certainty. "This changes everything," I said softly. I slid the paper towards her, tapping my name at the top line, Blair Quinn Soul. Investor legal co-owner listed first. She snatched it up with shaking fingers, scanning each paragraph. Her cheeks flushed crimson, her eyes darting across the page like she was searching for an escape route, hidden in the fine print. Her lips parted, breath ragged. "You don't belong here," she whispered, voice cracking under the weight of her unraveling. I tilted my head, studying her the way one might study a dying wasp trapped between window panes. "That's the thing, Veronica," I said, my voice calm as the tide. "I don't need to belong. I own it." Her mouth opened, opened again, forming silent rebuttals that never arrived. Around us, conversation stilled mid-sentence. Forks froze in mid-air. Someone set down their mimosa, with a faint trembling clink against crystal. She tried once more, desperation seeping through her mask. Her voice rose brittle and shrill. "This is a family tradition. It's not about money or paperwork, Blair. It's about legacy." I smiled then, a small sad smile that felt like the closing of a book I had outgrown. "Legacy isn't what you inherit," I said quietly. "It's what you build when no one thinks you can." I left her standing there, clutching a paper that weighed heavier than any diamond she wore. As I stepped out onto the aft deck, sea wind tangled my hair, stinging my lips with salt. The engines thrummed beneath my feet, alive, waiting. I closed my eyes, breathing in the metallic tang of truth, the quiet thunder of inevitability. When I opened them again, the horizon stretched wide and silent before me. Behind me, voices rose in fractured confusion. Veronica's carefully curated world was splintering hairline cracks, widening into chasms. Graham's voice reached my ears, soft, bewildered, apologetic. I didn't turn. I wasn't here for his guilt. I was here for my seat. And this time, I wasn't asking for it. Dinner was salmon again. Graham liked routine. Same marinade brushed on with distracted precision. Same wedge of lemon placed at exactly 2 o'clock on the plate. Same glass of dry white wine poured to the same line on the crystal stem. He refilled his glass twice, never noticing mine was still full. I sat across from him, my fork untouched beside the folded napkin. The overhead pendant light cast a golden circle onto the linen tablecloth between us. It felt like a spotlight illuminating everything unspoken. He was scrolling his phone thumb, flicking in restless, thoughtless rhythm. Stock alerts, commodity news, real estate market updates. Anything but me. I cleared my throat softly. The sound seemed to echo off the glassware and stainless steel appliances, reverberating in the cavernous silence between us. Did you know your family is planning another yacht trip? His thumb paused mid-scroll, but his eyes stayed on the screen for a beat too long before he looked up. Yeah, he said, blinking as if waking from a half-dream. Mom mentioned something about that last week. I watched him, the way his brow furrowed faintly as he tried to remember details that never mattered enough to keep. They're still finalizing the list I think he added already, looking back down at his phone. I tilted my head slightly, studying him the way one might study a specimen under glass. My voice was quiet, too calm to be casual. Am I on the list? He frowned, the question finally piercing the gauze of his distraction. Of course, he said the words, automatic, tossed across the table like scraps to a waiting dog. He didn't reach for his phone to check, didn't ask follow-up questions, didn't notice the tremor in my hands. He just returned to his screen, conversation closed. I let out a long silent breath, careful not to let it shake. Then I smiled, a small tight smile that didn't touch my eyes. Just curious. He nodded absently, reading something intently now. I'll double-check later, he mumbled. But we both knew he wouldn't. He never did. After dinner, I cleared the plates with mechanical precision, scraping leftover salmon into the disposal, rinsing each dish until the water ran clear. Graham retreated to the living room, ESPN's frenetic commentary, echoing from the television, filling the quiet with a too-loud apology for his absence. I stood at the sink, hands submerged in scalding water. Steam rose in gentle curls, fogging the window above the basin. Outside, dusk settled over the yard, in a bruised purple glow, shadows of branches dancing across the glass. Inside, the only thing moving was the slow swirl of soap bubbles circling the drain. Each plate I washed felt heavier than the last, not because of the ceramic, but because of everything layered atop it, all the times he chose silence over confrontation. All the times he let Veronica's words slide past, sharp as fishhooks, embedding in my skin while he looked away. All the times he pretended my questions were rhetorical, my pain and inconvenience. The sponge squeaked against porcelain, a small desperate sound, swallowed by the hum of the refrigerator, and distant crowd roars from the TV. I pressed harder, scrubbing in tight, furious circles until my knuckles whitened. I tried to remember the last time he had really looked at me. Not seen me, he saw me every day in passing in proximity. But looked at me, looked past the wife, past the convenience, past the silent housekeeper and silent supporter and silent everything I had become. The answer didn't come. The kitchen light above me flickered, once buzzing softly, a tired old bulb nearing burnout. For a brief second, darkness threatened to swallow the room whole. Then it steadied again, revealing me still standing there, soap suds dripping from my wrists, shoulders curved inward like a collapsing bridge. I wondered if Graham would notice when it finally gave out. I wondered if he'd notice when I did. From the living room, laughter erupted from the television. Graham chuckled along, feet propped on the coffee table, beer bottle sweating onto a coaster. He looked so comfortable, so safe, so perfectly untouched by the quiet war raging 2 rooms away. I finished the dishes, wiped down the counters, dried my hands on the dish towel, and hung it back in its place with meticulous care. Routine, control, the last scraps of dignity I still held. Then I stood there, palms pressed flat against the cool granite countertop, feeling the tremor in my chest subside into something worse, stillness. There are silences that soothe. There are silences that sharpen. This was the latter. I walked to the living room doorway and watched him for a moment. His face glowed with blue light from the TV mouth, curled into a half smile, eyes reflecting scores and replays and anything but me. "I'm going to bed early," I said. He hummed, not looking up. I turned away before he could see my eyes glaze with something too raw to name. Upstairs, I peeled off my clothes, each layer feeling heavier than it should. In the bathroom mirror, my face looked foreign. Eyes ringed with purple shadows, lips pale, cheekbones sharper than I remembered. I brushed my teeth, combed my hair, wiped steam from the mirror with the edge of my sleeve. I searched my reflection for the woman Graham married. I didn't find her. All I saw was me, raw, stripped bare, still standing. I crawled into bed alone, pulling the duvet up to my chin, staring at the ceiling fan, slicing the air above me into obedient little currents. I wondered if that was what I had become, a blade spinning in circles, cutting the same air over and over, never changing direction, never stopping, never noticed. Downstairs, I heard the clink of his beer bottle against the table, the muffled cheers of the game his low chuckle carried up through quiet hallways. I closed my eyes and let the tears come silently, hot and angry against my temples, not because of Veronica, not even because of Graham, but because I finally understood that silence isn't peaceful when it's forced, and some knives don't need to be swung to cut. They only need to be left on the table untouched until rust eats them alive. As I finished washing the last dish, my phone buzzed again. Another message from an unknown number. I wiped my hands, unlocked the screen, and felt my stomach twist. It was a photo, blurry, taken in dim light, but I knew exactly what I was seeing. Graham, sitting at a restaurant table, across from Veronica, his hand resting lightly over hers. Both of them leaning in foreheads, almost touching lips curved in private smiles. The caption underneath no sender name, just 6 words that burned like acid through my veins. "He didn't forget your invitation? He lied." I stood there, frozen dish towel, dripping onto the floor. The photo on my phone screen seemed to pulse with its own sick heartbeat. Graham and Veronica, her manicured hand nestled under his, their heads bent close together like conspirators, like lovers. My vision blurred at the edges, not with tears, but with something colder, something heavier, something that settled deep in my bones, like winter frost, seeping through cracked windows. I scrolled down, scanning for a name, a number, any clue to soften the blow. There was nothing, just that message sitting below the photo like a final verdict. "He didn't forget your invitation. He lied." A silence settled in my chest, thick and suffocating. Memories flickered through my mind like a reel, burning in a dying projector. Graham frowning slightly, not meeting my eyes. "Of course you're on the list. Why wouldn't you be Graham swirling his beer bottle?" Eyes glazed as he shrugged. Maybe it was just a miscommunication. Graham never checking, never asking, never fighting. Because he already knew the truth. I walked slowly to the dining table, set my phone down, and sat. My knees felt numb against the hard wooden chair. The house was silent, except for the faint echo of ESPN from the living room, The sounds of men shouting at men over games that didn't matter. The sounds of a world that spun on, oblivious to everything breaking just beyond its field of vision. I placed the phone face up on the table, staring at their bent heads, the way her smile curved into something triumphant, possessive, predatory. I could almost hear her voice in that clipped, patronizing cadence. "You don't belong here, Blair. You never did." And now it made sense. She didn't just want me erased from their legacy. She wanted him, and he had let her. I stood up, feeling my pulse hammer under my skin like a war drum. Walked to the sink, turned on the tap, let cold water run over my burning wrists until they numbed to ice. The silver faucet hissed steadily, steam rising in soft curls, fogging the window until the world outside disappeared entirely. Then I dried my hands carefully, straightened my shoulders, and walked into the living room. Graham looked up, startled. "Hey, everything okay?" His voice was casual, lazy, laced with the confidence of a man who never imagined consequences. The flickering blue light from the TV lit his face in harsh lines. His hair was tousled from leaning against the couch, his shirt wrinkled sleeves, pushed up carelessly, exposing wrists that had once curled around my waist, at night warm and protective. Wrists I had trusted. I didn't speak. I walked forward, placed my phone face down on the coffee table in front of him. He blinked confused, then flipped it over. The color drained from his face so fast I almost felt pity. Almost. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes snapped up to mine, wide and frantic, searching for mercy that wasn't there. I held his gaze steady and unblinking. Finally, my voice came, low and calm the way ice sounds when it cracks across a frozen lake. "Don't worry, Graham. I'm not angry." I leaned down close enough to see sweat bead on his forehead, close enough to smell the stale beer on his breath, close enough to watch the exact moment fear replaced arrogance. "I'm done being angry." I straightened, picked up my phone, and turned away. As I walked back toward the kitchen, I heard him choke out my name, half plea, half panic. I didn't stop, not this time. In that moment, I felt it, the shift, the truth settling into place like a blade finding its sheath. They thought they had erased me, but they forgot one simple ancient law of nature: the woman you erase does not vanish. She becomes the ghost that haunts your throne. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the dining table long after Graham retreated upstairs, the photo of him and Veronica still glowing on my phone screen like an unblinking eye in the darkness. Its light painted my face in pale accusation, highlighting every line time and silence had carved into my skin. The house was silent except for the low mechanical hum of the refrigerator, the occasional tick of cooling pipes, and the groan of old wood beams shifting in the cool night air. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Those would have been mercies, releases, and I wasn't ready for release, not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and began typing. First, I pulled up the yacht ownership documents, scanned each line with clinical precision the way a surgeon traces skin before making an incision. My name first. His name added later for tax convenience, they had said at the time, as though my ownership were a technicality, a courtesy note to be scribbled in pencil then erased. I opened a fresh folder on my desktop and labeled it Legacy Reclaimed. I uploaded the original ownership contract signed by me alone before the marriage merger, the bank transfer receipts from Quinn & Co. Logistics, my company, my earnings, my risk. The charter company's cancellation email showing Veronica's name, not mine. The anonymous photo of Graham's betrayal, her hand under his like a claim laid in broad daylight. The screenshot where she crossed out my cabin assignment and replaced it with Belle, her granddaughter, her heir. Each file a dagger sharpened in silence, each upload a reclamation of the truth they tried to bury beneath soft words and polite dismissals. By 3 a.m., I sat back in my chair, exhaustion prickling at the edges of my vision, eyelids burning, temples throbbing with caffeine and unspent grief. But under it pulsed something hotter, harder clarity. They had built their empire on carefully curated illusions, family, legacy, loyalty, words they draped in gold leaf and candlelight, paraded before donors and board members like holy relics, symbols of a dynasty woven from generational sacrifice and moral authority. But I knew better now. I knew the truth behind the candlelight. Legacy wasn't inherited like an heirloom ring slipped onto a trembling finger at 18. Legacy was built in darkness, with blistered hands and sleepless nights, with sacrifice and discipline and pain no one else saw. I didn't inherit this yacht. I didn't marry into it. I birthed it. I carved it out of risk and midnight proposals and boardroom wars fought with nothing but my bare mind and will. And they tried to steal it from me as though I were an inconvenient footnote in their story, a name to be scratched out in pencil, replaced by a new wife, a new daughter-in-law, a new belle. As dawn broke pale and reluctant across the kitchen window, I made myself a cup of coffee. Black, no sugar. The bitter taste felt honest on my tongue, grounding me in what mattered. I carried the mug to the study and sat at Graham's wide oak desk, the one he liked to call his thinking space, though the only thoughts it ever held were mine. I opened his laptop. The password was still our wedding date. A flicker of laughter twisted in my chest, bitter and humorless. How poetic that the password to his kingdom was me. I logged in, searched his email. It didn't take long to find them chains upon chains with Veronica marked confidential in bright red flags. Transitioning ownership discreetly. Protecting family brand equity. Don't worry, she won't fight it. She never does. She never does. Those 3 words glowed on the screen, searing into my chest like a hot brand pressed to flesh. Branding me docile. Branding me forgotten. Branding me erased. I forwarded every email to myself, then to my lawyer. I typed a simple instruction. Prepare to execute Clause 14. Full transfer. Freeze joint accounts pending review. Call me by noon. I closed the laptop softly, almost lovingly, and looked around the study. The walls lined with framed certificates, investment plaques, and family photos, each face smiling down at me, oblivious witnesses to his complicity. The perfect gallery of curated reality. In that moment, I felt it, the silent storm rising in me. Not fury, not grief, power. They thought erasing me would be easy. After all, I had been silent for so long, smiling politely, nodding at board meetings, swallowing truths like poison pills, dissolving them quietly in my gut, while applauding Graham's half-wins and Veronica's half-truths. They mistook my silence for submission, but what they never understood was this: a storm doesn't announce itself with noise. It gathers in stillness, in dark corners, in quiet rooms at dawn, until it is ready to consume. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and placed it back in the cabinet. The sun was rising now, casting a weak gray glow across upstairs. I heard Graham's footsteps shuffle toward the shower, the faucet's squealing open water pounding against tile. He didn't know the world was already shifting under his feet. He didn't hear the thunder rolling beneath my quiet, but he would. They all would. Soon. I printed the cancellation email on thick ivory paper, the kind that felt expensive under my fingertips. I wanted it to last. I wanted its truth to carry weight beyond pixels on a screen. I slipped it into my folder labeled Tax and Property, sliding it between land transfer deeds and annual audit reports. For a moment, I just stood there staring at the manila cover, feeling something click quietly into place inside my chest, like the final piece of a lock sliding home. That night, the house was silent. Graham was in the den watching men yell at each other over basketball scores. His laughter drifted through the dark hallways, hollow and careless. I carried my laptop to the dining table, the wood cool under my bare arms. I opened a blank note and titled it, "Things She's Done That I Let Slide." The first item came easily. Forgot to tag me in the family Christmas photo. We'd all stood there that winter morning wearing matching tartan pajamas. Veronica insisted on ordering for everyone. I stood next to Graham, hand tucked lightly into the crook of his elbow, smiling at the camera like I belonged there. Later that night, she posted the photo tags lined up beneath it, like a roll call of worthiness. My name wasn't there. "Just Merry Christmas from the Prestons," I commented once. She never replied, sent group brunch invites after telling me they were taking a break from gatherings. I remembered that brunch. The photos of Eggs Benedict and mimosas she posted later captioned, "Sundays are for family." I'd spent that morning alone at the farmer's market buying oranges and rosemary bread. I didn't need filling my kitchen with smells that reminded me I was alive, even if uninvited. Tagged the wrong Blair on Facebook and left it up for days. That one still stung. A post congratulating Blair for volunteering at their charity gala. But it linked to another Blair, a friend of Veronica's from her yoga studio. I commented lightly, "Think you tagged the wrong Blair." She heart reacted, never edited it. For days I watched the other Blair bask in praise meant for me, until eventually I deleted my comment. I never corrected her again after that. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, memories flooding in faster than I could catch them. Introduced me to her friends as Graham's wife, never by name. Told the caterer I was allergic to shrimp, so I wouldn't eat the appetizers she'd ordered just for herself. Once called me the +1 when the photographer asked who I was at the gala. By the time I paused, my jaw ached from clenching. I hadn't realized it until then, the way rage can hide inside bone. I rolled my shoulders back, feeling each vertebra crack softly into place. I scrolled back to the top of the list. Read it slowly. Let each line sear into me like a brand. I wasn't writing this to punish her. I was writing it to stop forgiving her. I closed the laptop softly, like tucking in a sleeping child, and rested my palms flat on the cool wood of the table. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, rattling them slightly in their frames. But inside, everything was still. The kind of stillness that comes after an earthquake, when dust hangs in the air and you can finally see what cracked. For years, I had thought my silence made me strong, that not reacting was proof of dignity, of maturity, of choosing peace. But dignity without recognition is just erasure by another name. I didn't want to be strong anymore. I wanted to be seen. I stood up, carrying the laptop back to my office. As I passed the den, Graham looked up from his game eyes, bleary with tired contentment. "Going to bed?" he asked. I paused in the doorway, studying the lines of his face, softened by lamplight. A man so comfortable in his own safety, he never learned how to protect anyone else. "Soon," I said. He nodded already, turning back to the television, never noticing the storm gathering quietly in my chest. Upstairs, I placed the laptop on my desk, turned off the light and stood by the window looking out into the night. Streetlights pooled gold onto the empty road. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl hooted low and mournful. I pressed my fingertips to the cold glass, feeling the pulse of my own blood beating steady and relentless under my skin. She thinks she erased me, but shadows don't disappear. They only wait for the right light to reveal them again. And I was done waiting. Graham came upstairs late that night. I was sitting at my vanity, brushing my hair in long, deliberate strokes, each pass smoothing dark strands into gleaming order. The bristles whispered through my hair, rhythmic and quiet, the only sound between us. Under the warm lamplight, my reflection looked calm, almost serene, though inside my veins burned with an electric stillness. He sat on the edge of the bed with a heavy sigh, elbows resting on his knees, rubbing his temples with shaking fingers. For a moment, he looked older than his 42 years. Or maybe he just looked exposed, stripped of the illusions he clung to like armor. Blair. He started softly, his voice thick with the forced gentleness men use when they think you're being unreasonable, when they want to soothe you back into compliance. Look about the yacht thing. I didn't stop brushing. My movements remained slow, precise, each pull through my hair a silent refusal to surrender my composure. I met his gaze in the mirror. His eyes flicked up to meet mine only for an instant before darting away to the floor. He couldn't hold them. Couldn't stand in the truth of what he'd done. "Don't do this," he said, shaking his head slightly, his voice edging toward desperation. "Don't make it bigger than it is." I paused, turning slightly on the stool to face him fully. My hair fell around my shoulders like a dark, silent curtain, framing my face with cold clarity. "Make it bigger," I repeated, my voice low, even deadly calm. "You think I'm making this up?" He sighed again, rubbing his palms down the thighs of his jeans, the sound of denim rough and grating in the silence. "No, I'm not saying that. I don't want this to turn into a fight. Not with them. Not with you." He looked up then, eyes wide and pleading like a boy caught in a lie he didn't think would matter. His gaze shimmered with unshed tears he'd never let fall. "I don't want to choose between you and my family." The words fell into the space between us like a stone dropped into deep water, heavy, final. I watched the ripples spread across his face. Guilt, fear, resignation, all converging into that one quiet confession. He wouldn't choose me. I stood up slowly, the legs of the stool scraping softly against the hardwood floor, the sound echoing in the dim room like a closing door. I walked toward him, stopping just close enough to feel the warmth radiating off his skin. He looked up at me, eyes wide, breathing shallow hope, flickering across his face like a dying candle. I tilted my head slightly, studying him. The man I once believed would stand in front of me when the world turned cruel. The man who now cowered behind comfort and habit, letting the world swallow me whole so long as he remained untouched. My voice was calm, almost kind when I spoke. "You don't have to choose, Graham." Relief bloomed across his face too quickly, too desperately, like a man gulping down poisoned water in a desert. Then I leaned closer, letting my words slice between us like a surgeon's scalpel, clean and unforgiving. "But don't you dare pretend they aren't doing what they're doing." He opened his mouth to speak, to object, to defend them, or himself. But nothing came out. His jaw worked soundlessly, his eyes darting away from mine, unable to meet the unwavering truth, staring back at him. I straightened, smoothing down the hem of my robe, with deliberate precision. The silk slid cool and weightless under my palms, a reminder of the woman beneath, unbreakable, untouched by his cowardice. In that small movement, I felt lighter, as if finally naming his betrayal had freed me from the silent leash wrapped around my throat for so many years. He buried his face in his hands, elbows digging into his knees, shoulders trembling, with a sigh that sounded dangerously close to a sob. "Blair, please. I just want things to be easy." I watched him for a long moment, studied the curve of his back, the thinning hair at his crown, the way his fingers shook against his temples. Once I would have felt tenderness, pity, even responsibility for that pain. I would have reached out, smoothing my hand over his head to soothe him back into comfort. Now all I felt was the stillness of the storm inside me. "Easy," I echoed softly, tasting the word like poison on my tongue. Easy is just silence, repackaged for the comfortable. He didn't reply, didn't move, just sat there, our shoulders slumped forward small, and defeated the weight of his own weakness, folding him inward. I turned away, walked back to my vanity, and picked up the brush again. Pulled it slowly through my hair strand by strand, each stroke smoothing something wild and electric, rising under my skin. In the mirror, I saw him stand, move quietly to the bathroom, and close the door behind him. The lock clicked shut with a soft, apologetic finality. A sound I knew well. I kept brushing. Long, slow strokes. The bristles glided through my hair, each pull a reminder that I still belonged to myself. My reflection stared back at me, eyes dark and unblinking mouth, set in a thin, resolute line. I didn't need him to choose, because I had already made mine. I woke before dawn. The house was silent, draped in that pre-morning darkness that feels almost sacred. The kind of darkness that holds its breath waiting to see what you will do. I rose without turning on a light, feeling my way through familiar rooms, by memory alone. Barefoot, I walked across the cold oak floors to my study, each step echoing in the quiet, like a vow. The folder sat there on my desk, waiting. Its manila cover was dull and unassuming, blending into the mahogany grain beneath it. But inside it held the sharpest truths I owned, truths that could cut through illusions with surgical precision. I sat down and opened it, sliding out the papers one by one, laying them across the desk in careful rows, like relics prepared for worship. First, the yacht ownership contract. Heavy cream paper, the letterhead embossed with the maritime attorney's insignia legal language coiled around my name like armor. Blair Quinn, sole investor. Graham Preston, co-owner, added post-purchase for tax convenience. I ran my fingers over the inked letters, feeling each curve and serif press into my skin. I remembered signing it in that polished office downtown, sunlight slanting across the lacquered conference table. The banker's Mont Blanc pen, heavy in my hand. Remembered how calm I felt, how steady. There was no trembling, no fear, only certainty. For the first time in years, I had felt real. Solid in my own life, rooted to something I built with nothing but stubborn belief and ferocious will. Next, the bank transfer receipts. I spread them out like a timeline of conquest. 5 years of wire transfers, each line item, a monument to nights. I drove delivery trucks myself when drivers quit, without notice to mornings. I slept 2 hours before pitching to investors who told me I was too soft to lead logistics to afternoons. I steamed, thrifted blazers in gas station bathrooms before client meetings because I couldn't afford both tailoring and rent that month. Every zero in those balances was a mile driven, a contract won, a betrayal survived. They weren't just numbers, they were bone, blood, Brer, mine. Finally, I pulled out an old folded page worn thin along its creases. My original notes from the day I decided to buy the yacht. The ink had faded in places, but at the top, scribbled in black pen and circled twice, it still read, "You don't need their validation. Build the thing. Make it real." I remembered that version of me so vividly, I could almost feel her heartbeat inside my chest. Sitting alone in my office at 3 a.m., eyes burning from spreadsheets, adrenaline scraping the inside of my veins raw. She didn't know where this would end. She didn't know about Veronica or Graham's convenient betrayals or the countless polite humiliations yet to come. But she believed in herself enough to sign the check. I sat back in my chair staring at the evidence of my life laid out like a prosecution exhibit. My life, my work, my yacht. The first thing I ever bought that no one handed to me. No wedding gift, no inheritance, no family favor wrapped in barbed strings of gratitude. Just me. But somehow, over months and years of brunches and backhanded compliments, of place cards that said Blair Preston instead of Blair Quinn, of photos captioned "The Preston Legacy Yacht," in glossy society magazines, it became theirs. Veronica called it a family heirloom. Graham called it Mom's favorite place. Their friends called it the Preston Yacht. And me, I was just there, quiet, smiling, pouring mimosas, organizing catering, watching them claim ownership over the one thing I had built alone, watching them edit me out of my own story, like an inconvenient footnote. For a long time I thought staying silent meant dignity, grace, that if I was small enough, good enough, agreeable enough, eventually they would see me, that their validation would crown my worth. But this morning, as dawn light leaked pale and indifferent across the papers, I understood silence didn't protect me. It erased me. I gathered each document, sliding them back into the folder one by one, pressing them down flat with the heel of my hand. Each thud was a heartbeat, a war drum, a promise. I closed the folder and sat there, breathing in the quiet. The rage inside me was no longer hot and thrashing, no longer desperate to be heard. It was something colder, steelier, a silent resolve settling deep into bone, forging itself into unbreakable certainty. They thought this yacht was their legacy. They thought erasing me would be simple. They thought I would remain silent forever. But I was done letting them write me out of the story I built. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. And when I reclaimed what was mine, they would finally learn. You cannot erase the author of your kingdom, not without burning down the throne she built for you to sit upon. I arrived at the marina before sunrise. The world was still draped in gray, the sky a bruised violet bleeding slowly into dawn. I stepped out of the car heels, clicking against the dock's worn plank suitcase rolling behind me with a low, determined hum. My outfit was deliberate, a simple black dress structured and silent, a thin tan coat that moved like liquid in the morning breeze. No jewelry beyond my wedding band, no lipstick, no statement heels. I wasn't here to impress them. I was here to reclaim what was mine. As I walked down the dock, the yachts lined up before me gleamed under the sodium lights like ivory teeth. The air smelled of salt and money, of fuel, and wet rope of old power clinging to steel and wood. Then I saw her. Veronica stood near the boarding gate, her silhouette framed by the rising sun. Perfect hair cream, linen jumpsuit, diamond studs catching the first gold rays of morning. Her voice carried across the dock all bright sweetness as she greeted guests, stepping aboard my yacht. When she spotted me, her smile didn't falter, not immediately. It froze mid-curve, her eyes narrowing just enough to reveal the tremor beneath her polished composure. "Blair," she called out, voice dripping honey. "We didn't know you'd be joining us this morning." I kept walking, suitcase wheels thumping softly behind me, each step slicing cleanly through the quiet. "No," I said evenly, my voice low but carrying. "You didn't." Around her, people shifted uncomfortably. Tom cleared his throat. Graham hovered near the railing, gaze fixed on his phone screen like a drowning man clinging to driftwood. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. As I approached the boarding ramp, one of the yacht staff stepped forward, a tall woman in navy slacks and blazer clipboard tucked under her arm. Her eyes flicked to me, widened slightly. Then she straightened, posture snapping into professional formality. She spoke clearly, voice echoing across the dock. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Blair. The owner is now aboard." For a moment, the world went silent. Veronica's smile faltered, flickered, died. The muscles in her jaw worked furiously behind taut skin. Her manicured fingers curled tightly around the stem of her mimosa flute. Behind her, Graham lifted his gaze from his phone. Our eyes met. His face was pale, stricken with something between fear and resignation. I held his gaze for half a second, no longer, then turned away. I walked up the boarding ramp, each heel strike a drumbeat, echoing against steel rails. At the top, I paused, feeling the teak deck firm beneath my feet. The breeze lifted strands of hair from my face, carrying the scent of salt and roses from the floral centerpieces Veronica had no doubt arranged herself. I inhaled deeply, letting the cold morning air fill my lungs until it ached. Then I exhaled. I didn't greet anyone as I passed. Not Tom shifting his weight nervously. Not Veronica, who stood frozen mid-step, mouth parted like a fish stranded on shore. Not Graham, who had begun moving toward me, hand half-raised, words forming silently behind his teeth. I walked past them all down the port-side hallway, past the salon decked in white orchids and gold-rimmed glasses, past place cards carefully arranged in social hierarchies that no longer applied. At the end of the corridor, I stopped, turned slowly. They were all watching me. Veronica's eyes burned with a cocktail of rage and humiliation. Graham's with dread, the others with wide-eyed discomfort, sensing a power shift they couldn't name, but felt in their bones. My voice was calm, each word precise, slicing cleanly through the morning hush. "This isn't your yacht." Veronica opened her mouth to object, but I raised a single finger, silencing her before the first syllable slipped free. I continued, tone low, final. "You didn't build it. You didn't buy it. You didn't sacrifice anything to bring it into this world. You merely decorated it." I paused, letting the silence settle around my words like concrete. "And I am done letting you host parties in my house while I stand in the kitchen pouring drinks." No one moved. A seagull cried somewhere overhead at its mournful call, slicing across the deck. The engines hummed to life beneath my feet, low and powerful, vibrating up through my bones. I turned, facing the open sea stretching out before us, and felt a smile curve across my lips. Not a polite smile, not a diplomatic smile, a smile of reclamation. Behind me, Veronica finally found her voice, sharp and trembling. "You think this changes anything? You think showing up makes you part of this family?" I didn't turn back. My eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, pale gold bleeding into endless gray. "No," I said softly. "I don't want to be part of your family." I placed my hand on the cold steel railing, fingers curling around it with quiet ownership. "I want my yacht back." I didn't sit. I stood at the edge of the deck, feeling the engines pulse beneath my feet as the yacht began to glide away from the dock. The water shimmered under the early sun, gold flecks rippling across the slate-gray surface like scattered coins. Salt air filled my lungs, sharp and honest. Behind me, the others bustled around, trying to pretend everything was normal. Tom murmured something about the itinerary. Veronica busied herself rearranging a vase of white orchids that didn't need rearranging. Graham moved aimlessly from group to group. Laughter forced words, clipped eyes flicking back to me every few seconds, like a dog waiting to be called home. I didn't call him. They tried to continue their morning brunch as planned. Waiters emerged from the galley carrying trays of avocado toast, topped with microgreens and edible flowers. Champagne bottles popped. Crystal flutes clinked. The conversations floated around me. Surface chatter thin and desperate. "Did you see the sunset last night? This weather is perfect for sailing. Veronica, where did you find these linens? They're exquisite." But under the words throbbed something else, an electric tension humming through the teak and steel. No one met my eyes directly. No one invited me to sit. They didn't know how. Because for the first time, I wasn't standing there hoping to be included. I was standing there owning everything they feared losing. At one point, Veronica tried to reclaim the room. She stood, flute in hand, tapping it lightly with a manicured nail. The chime rang out across the deck, brittle and bright. Conversation stilled. All eyes turned to her. She smiled wide, polished her lips, stretched so tight they almost trembled. "I just want to thank everyone for joining us today," she began, voice syrupy and false. "This yacht has always been a symbol of our family's legacy. It's about tradition, About bringing the right people together. Her gaze flicked toward me, then skittered away like a bird afraid of landing on hot metal. Because legacy isn't just what we inherit. She continued, her smile tightening into something colder, sharper. It's what we uphold, and some of us understand that better than others. A hush fell over the group, so dense I could hear the engines humming beneath us, the water lapping against the hull. Forks hovered midair. Someone coughed softly into their napkin. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. Instead, I set down my glass of water, turned to face her, fully, and spoke, my voice low, but carrying each syllable honed to a blade. "You're right, Veronica." She froze, smile twitching. "Legacy isn't what we inherit. It's what we build." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the ownership contract, folded neatly, crisp edges, gleaming in the morning light. I didn't hand it to her. I simply held it between my fingers, letting everyone see the bold black lettering at the top. Purchase Agreement, Quinn & Co. Logistics. I let the silence stretch taut and trembling, like a violin string, pulled to breaking point. And I built this. No one spoke. Tom shifted uncomfortably. Graham inhaled sharply but said nothing. The only sound was the creak of the yacht as it sliced through the waves, carrying us further from shore, further from the world they controlled. Veronica's smile cracked, then a hairline fissure splitting her mask in two. Her fingers tightened around her champagne flute until the glass whined softly under the pressure. For a fleeting moment, her eyes burned with something raw rage, humiliation, fear. Then she blinked it away, plastering her performance smile back onto trembling lips. But it was too late. The damage was done. Not by what I said, but by what I didn't say. By standing there silent, immovable, unbothered, I had ripped the curtain off her stage. I watched her crumble under the weight of her own words. I turned away from her, then facing the open sea once more. The horizon stretched wide and indifferent before me, a pale line between sky and water that belonged to no one. Behind me, conversations resumed in hushed, uneven bursts. Cutlery clinked nervously against porcelain. Someone dropped a fork. Graham said my name softly, a question, a plea. I didn't answer. I simply stood there, feeling the wind whip my hair around my face, tasting salt on my lips. In that moment, I realized something. They never needed my voice to hear me. My silence was louder than any scream. My stillness shook their foundation more violently than any outburst ever could. Because I wasn't a guest fighting for a seat at their table. I was the ground beneath it. And when the ground decides to move, no one at the table remains standing. Lunch was served on the upper deck, a curated affair of lobster rolls, truffle fries, and chilled rosé poured into crystal glasses, catching the noon sun like captive stars. Veronica sat at the head of the table, posture perfect, smile, frozen fingers trembling, minutely each time she reached for her glass. I didn't sit. I stood at the railing, feeling the wind pull strands of hair across my face, tasting salt and silence. Conversation fragments floated around me, clipped laughter, forced compliments, eyes darting nervously between us. Finally, Veronica cleared her throat. "Blair," she called, voice pitched high and bright. "Won't you join us? We were just talking about next summer. Perhaps Capri. Doesn't that sound lovely?" I turned slowly, letting the breeze lift my coat behind me like a quiet flag. Her smile flickered when she saw my eyes. I walked forward, each step deliberate, heels tapping against teak with the finality of a gavel. At the head of the table, every eye turned to me. Tom pale and sweating. Graham gaze downcast. Veronica's smile stretched thin as paper. I pulled the folded transcript from my coat pocket, the one my lawyer sent that morning documenting her conversation with their legal consultant. I laid it in front of her plate, smoothing its edges with my fingertips. She frowned, eyes scanning the bolded line I had highlighted. She's not blood. She shouldn't own a family asset. Her breath caught audibly. Around the table, cutlery froze mid-air, the paper's edge fluttering like a warning flag. I spoke softly, my voice low but carrying, "You spent months orchestrating my erasure, telling everyone this yacht was your family's legacy." She swallowed. Blare eye. I raised a hand, silencing her mid-sentence. "You forgot one thing, Veronica." I leaned in slightly, letting my shadow fall across her plate. "I built this legacy before any of you even knew how to spell it." I pulled out the purchase contract, flipped to the signature page, and tapped my name. Initial down payment, Blair Quinn. Sole investor. Legal owner listed first. No one spoke. Graham sat, frozen lips parted in silent plea. Veronica's face blanched foundation, unable to hide crimson streaking her neck. I slid the papers back into my folder, then looked at her, letting each word fall like an executioner's blade. "You can keep building your stories, but not on my name." Silence crashed over the table. Finally, Harold cleared his throat. "Well," he said quietly, "I think it's clear whose yacht this is." A murmur rippled around the table. Not outrage, just realization. Veronica sat back, blinking rapidly, tears welling, but refusing to fall. I turned away and walked to the railing once more. The sea stretched endless before me, blue-gray and silver, under the noon sun. Behind me, no one spoke. Just silence, the kind that follows a verdict. And as I stood there, feeling the yacht cut cleanly through rolling waves beneath me, I realized I hadn't come to fight them. I came to watch them drown in the waters they tried to pull me under. That evening, I sat alone at the stern as the sun bled gold into the horizon. Veronica didn't come near me. Graham hovered in the salon, pretending to read market news he couldn't focus on. I sipped my black coffee slowly, feeling the wind cool against my skin. No one spoke to me. No invitations, no forced laughter. Just quiet respect, laced with fear. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. I wasn't defending my place anymore. I was occupying it. Because true power isn't in taking back what's yours with screams or fists. It's in sitting in silence so vast, they hear your absence in their bones. They thought erasing me would keep their story clean. But the truth is, I was never their footnote. I was the author. I want you to ask yourself, have you ever let someone write you out of your own life? Have you swallowed their silences? Convinced dignity meant staying quiet. Let this be your reminder. Silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's the final word. If this story touched you, drop a 1 in the comments. Tell me, where in your life are you ready to take your seat back without asking, "Thank you for being here, for reading my words, for feeling them in your chest, for seeing yourself somewhere in my silence and my storms." I don't take your time lightly. I hope these stories remind you that your voice matters, your boundaries matter, and your seat at the table never needs permission. Thank you for witnessing my truth and for holding your own just as fiercely.